Chapter 23. Callie's trip back to the surface had been a colossal waste of time. The facility had been abandoned. The base's docking platform was as empty as the computer core. While the landing pad in town had been destroyed during the attack, the docking platform which connected to the base complex was still operational. The base must have been mostly abandoned hours prior to Syntholo's arrival. Someone must have stayed behind to accept his landing request, only to leave just after they'd finished wiping the station computers. Tyrell salvaged most of what he wanted from Syntholo's ship prior to scuttling it. Naturally, Mistress Kaylani had her conditions, but nothing that Callie could object to. They needed that Mystrium sensing technology. All that she asked in return was that Lady Darkseid personally meet with her at her earliest convenience. Tyrell was concerned that it could be a trap. Callie had dismissed his concerns immediately. Mistress Kaylani was both influential and interesting. Even if the invitation had more to do with her title than who she really was, Callie looked forward to meeting her. Eventually she'd have to make the long trip to Dominion space. She understood earliest convenience was a polite way of saying as soon as physically possible, but she was concerned that rushing off would set a bad precedent. Tyrell's footage of her little speech had garnered more interest than they'd anticipated, even if they'd garnered more attention while Callie was unconscious, and nobody knew if she was still alive. News was getting around fast. Lady Darkseid had stepped out from behind the proverbial curtain, and nobody had a clue what was going to happen next. Prior to taking down their satellite array and leaving orbit, they'd already received so many messages that Tyrell had been forced to disable that function on the data feed. Sorting through all the messages had kept Tyrell busy during their return trip. Cyanide hadn't said a word to her since their conversation on Najrok. Callie felt like she was being ignored by her Tejmare and longed for Shinji's company, desperate for distraction. The trip back to Hyrule had taken just under 3 days' time. This had given her some time to train the Za-Galteam twins using her telepathic abilities. Syntholo and Gaori had requested to observe one of the training sessions. Initially, she'd been reluctant, but had eventually given in and agreed to allow them to sit in during her final session before their arrival. Callie stood in the center of the large tub with the twin Za-Galteam kneeling on either side of her. Her hands were resting in the center of their broad, black reptilian heads. Their white fur, which covered all but their hands, feet, and head, swayed slowly in the frigid water. She was regulating the water temperature with her Mystrionics to ensure the hot-blooded reptiles' body temperatures didn't get too high while their own abilities were temporarily inactive. Each of the twins possessed a talent for a different mystic art. Ziku had a natural talent for Mystrionics, and Yari had a talent for the physical discipline of Kobitange. Having mastered each of these disciplines, Callie was able to train them both, simultaneously. She was telepathically writing the knowledge directly into their minds. They would still need to practice and develop the mental discipline to apply her teachings, but this would provide them with a firm foundation to build upon. Lady Darkseid, Tyrell said over the ship intercom, "Please report to the bridge." "We're a little busy down here," Gaori said angrily. Light glistened off of her dark feathers. Her broad-pointed beak hung open slightly as she spoke. Both of her tongues rolled around in her mouth as she formed the words of a land that was not her own. "I don't care what you're doing down there," Tyrell snapped. "I need her up here now." "You're just going to have to wait," Syntholo said sternly. "Her mind is somewhere else." "She's needed on the bridge," Tyrell scoffed. "I think bath time can wait." "They're not taking a bath, you idiot," Gaori snarled. "She's training the twins." "You picked a hell of a time for it," Tyrell grumbled. "How long will the download take?" "The what?" Gaori asked. "He's a cyberpath," Syntholo explained to the avian woman. "It's like telepathy, but with computers and machines. He seems to have forgotten that people don't work like computers. Which isn't unusual for people with his skill set. In principle, what Lady Darkseid is doing is similar to a cyberpath downloading information from a computer. Gowri tilted her head to the side. Syntholo responded to Tyrell. There's no way to know. I'm still cleared for bridge access. Is it something I can help you with? Are you a three-tailed Terran? Tyrell asked with a chuckle. Syntholo smirked and glanced at Callie. Callie withdrew her hands from the twins' foreheads and stepped out of the water. That would be me, Callie said irritably. I'm on my way. I'll have to finish their training later. They should come out of their trance in a few minutes. Would you two help them back to their rooms? Let me know right away if there are any problems with their heat management abilities. Gowri nodded her head. It would be our pleasure, Syntholo said with a smile. Callie slid on her armored pants and furry, leather, bikini top. Lady Darkseid, Tyrell said, I really need you up here now. I had to get dressed, Callie snapped. I'm on the way now. The elevator's waiting for you, Tyrell said. Callie rushed through the door, down the hallway, turned right, and continued to the elevator. The door opened as she approached and closed behind her. It was a short trip to the bridge. Tyrell was sitting in the captain's chair at the helm of the ship. What's wrong? Callie growled. This had better be important. The main display on the far wall was offline. The consoles by the control chair displayed their current course on one screen and a scanner display on the other. All but one of the wall displays were inactive. Take a seat and see for yourself, Tyrell said as he motioned toward the seat by the active screen. You called me up here to read a message, she asked. Couldn't it wait? The message will delete itself if it's not read within a narrow window of time. If you don't read it now, you won't be able to. Who is it from? She asked as she walked toward the chair. Phantom Hound. Callie rushed over to the console and hit the button to accept the message. I wish you'd move that fast when I call for you, Tyrell grumbled. You don't understand, Callie said. He's been dead for over a year. This message shouldn't exist. What encryption format did the file use? The system shows it as L13742. That's the right format, Callie scowled. Who are they? Tyrell asked, if you don't mind me asking. A creepy, blind, old Lupian, Callie chuckled softly. If Gowroon is right, he's not only one of the founders of Project Acorn, but also had co-founder status with the Black Church. He's a bit of an oracle, or was, I suppose. What do you mean by that? As Gowroon put it. Labarth has a way of making sure things end the way he wants. How reliable are his predictions? Most of his messages include a stack of files to choose from depending on which course of action you end up taking. Sometimes he predicts your reactions so accurately you feel like you're having a conversation. It's just unnerving. Sounds like it, he remarked with a note of cynicism. Link this monitor to the main screen, Callie said with a sly grin. His messages are usually audio only, but I think it's best if you know what we're dealing with. That sounds dubious, Tyrell chuckled softly. This isn't the sort of information that gets a person killed just for knowing it, is it? Just prep the monitor. The main screen echoed the display of the small wall console. The message from Phantom Hound lacked the long instruction list which had been included last time. It consisted of 3 files, and their names told her all she needed to know. Abdication, defiance, or submission? Tyrell asked. Are they serious? So, give up the title of Lady Darkseid, declare war on them, or become their puppet? They've been pulling my strings since the beginning. While I can't honestly say I expected this, it doesn't surprise me either. Would you mind explaining to me what this is all about? Have you ever heard of the prophecy of riddled infinity? Sure, Tyrell said with a shrug. It's history's biggest con job if you want my opinion. There seem to be prophets everywhere these days. I'd wager it's all about the other kind of prophet. Almost all the major players have trotted out some fool kid and claimed their little pawn is the chosen one. It's a heaping pile of Flannex dung. Actually, Callie said with a smile, the words are from an ancient Johnny nursery rhyme which was recited in the elder tongue. It loses almost all meaning once translated. It has some predictive power, but only as much as any other string of random phrases does. If you spend enough time obsessing over it, those words start to mean whatever you want them to. If I cared to, I'm sure I could map my life to the damn thing, but why would I want to? I'm not some damn marionette, and anyone that tries to treat me like one is in for a universe of pain. Callie smiled fondly as she thought back to Cyanide's words, without the puppeteer you lose direction, and without those strings you lose the ability to dance. I just need to learn to dance without strings, Callie mused. So then, Tyrell asked with a crooked grin, are you going to select defiance? Do you see another choice? Tyrell blinked at the main display in disbelief. Let me guess, Callie snickered, there's a new choice now. I wouldn't expect anything less from Lubarth, the Phantom Hound. This doesn't make sense. It shouldn't have changed. There's nothing coded in the message that would do that. Computers just don't work this way. You could say there's magic in his words, Callie said with a shrug. She glanced at the screen. The prior 3 files were gone, replaced by a new entry entitled Ascension. From nefarious to dubious, Tyrell said mockingly, or do I have that backward? Callie sighed heavily. Have you ever longed for a long boring life? Don't ask me, he snickered. I'm retired. If you say that enough, I might start believing you, she snickered. We still have a contract, Tyrell insisted. You were the one that said you wanted to renegotiate, which we still haven't done. So, I have no idea what contract you're talking about. Tyrell smirked. Are you going to open that file, or not? Honestly, Callie scowled, I'd rather not. Don't be catty, Lady Darkseid, Lubartha's pre-recorded voice said. It doesn't suit you. You seemed like such a nice young woman back when you were Kayla. Then again, I never really knew the part of you that was Kivaza. It would seem that ancient shadow of yours has become dominant in that awkward relationship you have with yourself. Can you pause the recording? Callie asked urgently. No, Tyrell answered. It's not a normal audio file. Now that you have defeated Corrin, return to face Raven 1, and you've met with your aunt and accepted your position at the heart of our new alliance, Lubartha's voice continued. Just close the file, Callie grumbled. There's no point to this. Worried I may learn too much about you? Tyrell teased. No, Callie said with consternation. He's wrong. I've never even heard of him being this far off the mark. Either this isn't really him, or something has gone so far awry that those proverbial strings I mentioned have gotten tangled, severed, and burned. You did make that pretty little speech about not wanting anyone's marionette, Tyrell chided. I guess this means you're free from all that. You don't understand, Callie said. Project Acorn is at the heart of the new alliance, and he's the one that directs their course. If his predictions are this wrong, the consequences will send ripples throughout Corrales. This isn't freedom. The puppeteer is dead. I guess it's hard for a dead man to adapt to change in the universe, Tyrell mocked. Callie sighed as the message continued to play. If you're interested, Tyrell said, I did track the message to its point of origin. We could go and take a look. The message stopped playing. Thanks for turning it off, Callie said softly. I didn't, he admitted, I'm not sure why it stopped. Where did the message come from, Callie asked, and how far is it from here? About as far as you can get, Tyrell chuckled. It's on another arm of the galaxy, on the opposite side of Corrales. We could get there from the Pilth Stargate, but it'll be a long trip back unless you can get permission to use the Midnight Fellowship's gate for the return trip. I'm sure that could be arranged, but if it's all the same to you, I'd rather make a stop at Hyrule to pick up some supplies. Supplies, he mocked. Is that what you're calling him? Her twin brown tails stirred restlessly behind her as her black tail whipped forward toward him. It displayed its stinger menacingly. Her tail muscles had compressed, extending to its maximum length. "Don't threaten me," Tyrell scoffed. "They have a mind of their own," Callie reminded him. "I'm not convinced you don't just use that as an excuse for being obnoxious. If I asked you what Phantom Hound was talking about, would you answer?" he asked. "I can tell you what he was wrong about," Callie snickered. "Well, I don't know who your aunt or Koran are, but I do know there are plenty of Ravenhawk clones out there, so I'm guessing there's an original out there somewhere." "I'm not exactly sure when his predictions started going wrong," Kayla said. "I guess it's all a matter of how you look at the timeline. It gets confusing when you're split into two separate people. I haven't defeated Koran. I arrived too late, and the battle was already over. Looking at the main timeline, that won't happen for years, so I suppose the confrontation with the Ravenhawk clone came first. He killed me, then I saved myself. He seemed unsure of the outcome of my second confrontation with the clone. That implies that he's just seeing potential outcomes, and making adjustments as needed. I killed the clone, but it wasn't Raven 1. That was the first major miscalculation that I'm aware of." "You're losing me," Tyrell grumbled. "You were split into two people, and got killed? You already failed to do something that hasn't happened yet and killed someone that had already killed you? Care to explain any of that, and which clone did you kill?" "It was Raven 11. I suspect Raven 1 has taken Bookworm's place." "Who in the name of the powers is Bookworm?" "My aunt, General Vaughn." Tyrell blinked in disbelief. "Honorary title, right? You're not trying to tell me you're actually part Gyron or something?" "In a manner of speaking," Callie said thoughtfully. "When I was genetically engineered, they used some Gyron DNA to link the other samples together. That's the part of my genome that I got my tails from." "Genetic engineering?" Tyrell gaped. "Are there any answers you can give me that don't just lead to more questions?" Callie paused to consider. "That depends on how honest I'm willing to be. As long as your questions pertain to the present or immediate future, we'll be just fine." "How old are you?" he asked jestingly. 20, Callie said with a laugh, "but that's just my biological age. I've been around for over 40,000 years in one form or another. I've had this body for 8 years, but I started off at age 12. See what I mean?" "That's the last time I ask you a personal question," Tyrell snickered. Callie stuck out her tongue. "Do we have any idea who's disembarking once we reach Hyrule? We'll need to know who's staying with us before we put in a resupply request. For that matter, who do we send the request to?" "Send it to Gestajos, care of Gao Rune. I also need you to contact Bruja at Alliance Arms to find out if my new armor is ready yet. If it is, have Shinji pick it up on the way to Port Liberty." "Do you always ask retired old men to do your busy work?" Tyrell asked with a crooked grin. "As often as I can," Callie teased. "Oh, and when you send the supplies list, ask Gao Rune if Grax is available. I'd love to add him to my staff." "I'll take care of it, Lady Darkseid," Tyrell said, "but I will need you to notify the Port Authority about the changes you had me make to the ship registration. I already typed it up, but it needs to be sent with your voice key. Otherwise, we're not going to make it past the jump space disruptors. Oh, and would you mind if I put in a request to replace our current shuttle with a pair of smaller models? I was thinking a pair of orbital insertion fighters." Callie grumbled. "I'd rather not give up the Mauler. I like having a tank. Besides, we can use the back compartment for extra storage in a pinch." "What we need is a bigger ship," he complained. "We need something a lot sturdier if you're planning to go after the ship that attacked the Nadrock system. Hunter-killer classed ships, like this, are lightly armored with medium weapons. It doesn't matter what changes you make. There's just no getting around that. Increase the armor and you lose the ability to jump. If you increase the weapon specs past a certain threshold, you lose the ability to cloak reliably. You're not going to be able to take down a standard starship with a single hunter-killer, and the one we're hunting is far from standard. It's a beast. After we investigate the origin point of that message, you're going to need a new ship if we're going to hunt down the people that massacred all those refugees. Aren't I supposed to buy you a new ship once this is all over? Callie sneered. Don't worry about that right now. I'll just settle for this one if I have to. You never guaranteed it would be a new ship. Callie submitted her voice authorization key. Please prepare to re-enter jump space, Tyrell said over the ship intercom as the jump engines began their activation sequence. I didn't notice we dropped out, Callie commented. You were too busy playing in the bathtub, Tyrell snickered. The jump space disruptors kicked us into normal space just before I started calling for you. We received that message a few seconds later. Take my terminal off the main console, Callie instructed as she began typing a message. I'm a cyberpath, Tyrell chuckled. I don't need to look over your shoulder to know what you're typing. Sending a love letter to Pinky? No, Killer Lime and Squiddy, Callie said, and it's not a love letter. Who are they? Are you sure you want me to answer that? Callie teased. The Alliance has its own shipyards, Tyrell chuckled. I don't know why you're asking them for a referral. I'm sure the Alliance would be more than happy to oblige your whims. If they're going to give me the title of Lady Darkseid, the least they can do is help me get a new custom-designed flagship. I thought it was a person, not just a title, he said. Who was the original Darkseid? Callie laughed. If he only knew how complicated the answer to that question really was. What's so funny? You need to watch your wording. The origin of that term precedes the identity. Callie grinned. I assume you're asking about the title Lady Darkseid. It was created long before I was born, but it was made for me. Created by who? He asked, Phantom Hound? More answers, more questions, Callie teased. It all started under his instructions, so let's just go with yes. Fair enough, Tyrell grumbled. I'll go check with the others to see if any of them are staying on board, Callie said with a smile. 10 seconds until jump drive activation, Tyrell said over the intercom. Please brace for the distortion wave. Callie sat impatiently as he counted down and activated the jump drive. The distortion was hardly worth any real consideration. His warning was little more than a courtesy to their passengers. Have you fixed Jake's translator yet? Callie asked. I'm not sure I'd call it fixed, he said with a shrug. I replaced the damaged parts, but I didn't have a complete Loctarian language template available, so I'd question the reliability of the output. I hope he doesn't mind sounding strange. I had to cannibalize spare modules from the ship inventory to do the repairs, and all of the available units had female vocalization chips. It will have to do, Callie said with a sigh. If he decides to stay on with us, add a proper replacement to the resupply request. I'll have them remove the non-essential cargo from the hold while we're getting restocked. Callie sent one last message and headed back to the elevator. Where are you going? Tyrell asked. Downstairs, Callie said quizzically. Without this? Tyrell asked as he held up the translator module. One of her brown tails reached over and snatched it out of his hand. She held out her hand and waited. Give me the damn thing, she snapped as her tail held the translator just out of her reach. Her second brown tail reached up and started trying to wrestle the module away from its twin. Her black tail whipped forward between her legs and threatened the others with its retractable stinger. The other tails moved closer toward her as the struggle continued. She stepped forward and grabbed it away from her tails. You two are about useless, Callie grumbled. I see what you mean about the tails not listening, Tyrell laughed. The black tail has always been more cooperative, Callie explained. It's overprotective and a bit pervy, but at least it listens better than the other two. Wouldn't that mean your subconscious mind is a bit pervy? No comment, Callie blushed as she stepped onto the elevator and pushed the button. Tyrell was still laughing as the door finished closing. Chapter 24. The ship had been constructed to house 10 occupants. With the inclusion of Shinji and Grax, they'd only have one empty crew cabin. Callie planned to leave that room open for Cyan. The twins spent most of their time in the climate-controlled cargo bay. Their room wasn't completely necessary. Converting part of the cargo bay to quarters would suit them better, but would risk making them feel less like members of the crew. They were still young and orphaned by their species as well as their parents. Camaraderie and socialization were an important part of raising well-adjusted children. Callie had already filed the papers to legally adopt the twins, but was waiting for approval. She liked most of the refugees, but it wouldn't necessarily be bad if some of them decided to stay behind. The ship already felt a little cramped with 7 people on board. She expected Syntholo would be returning to the Kailani Dominion, and planned to encourage Jake to leave of his own volition. Callie had already chased the Loctarian out of the medical bay on 4 separate occasions. She suspected he had a drug problem, but without being able to communicate, no way for her to know for certain. Gaori hadn't been much help. Her understanding of the insectal trade language was very limited. Syntholo was standing just on the other side of the door as Callie stepped off the elevator. Lady Darkseid, he asked, I would like to request clearance to use the shuttle systems to contact my government. Tyrell, Callie said, did you hear? I heard, he answered swiftly. Grant him whatever clearance he needs, Callie said dismissively. He's the closest thing we have to a diplomat on board. Provide him the same level of privacy you permitted me earlier. Thank you, Syntholo said with a slight bow of his head. He walked past her onto the elevator. You do realize I was monitoring everything you were doing earlier? Tyrell asked over her personal communication unit as the door closed. Naturally, Callie chuckled softly. Just making sure I understood your instructions. You did, Callie said as she walked down to the intersection at the end of the hallway. She reached out with her consciousness. The twins were in the break room, Gaori was in her cabin, and Jake was in the medical bay. Again? Callie cursed under her breath as she turned to the left and stormed down the hallway. Hopefully, the translation module would work well enough to allow him to finally explain himself. Her tails moved around her restlessly as she flung the door open. Jake held out his 4 arms toward her with his 3-fingered hands splayed wide. His small pincers moved frantically as he tried to speak. His compound eyes made it difficult to judge his mood. Jake could understand the dominant trade languages, however, Loctarians were physically unable to speak them without electronic assistance. The helmsman did what he could to fix your translation module, Callie said irritably as she tossed it onto the bed in the center of the room. Put it on and explain yourself. He fastened the unit around his neck and began to speak. The module beeped softly as it processed what he was saying as he spoke. The voice that came out of the module sounded like that of a young girl. Callie winced at the sound. The translator said, myself man's medicine. You are action appreciation myself only looking for drugs. Infection am I setting in? Callie and the insect tilted their heads in opposite directions as he rested one of his hands on the translation module. He attempted to answer again, but this time he tried one phrase at a time and waited for the translation before continuing. No drug. Medicine. Infection. Jake pointed to the back of his left leg as he made the sounds that were translated as infection. He pointed to a device on the counter that Callie didn't recognize. Myself am trying compound as several drug people mine. He paused and slapped the module with exaggerated anger. Make drug. No infection. Are you trying to say you're a doctor? He pointed at her as she said doctor and bobbed his head. Is there something wrong with your leg? He said something, which was translated as infection. When I've come in here and you've had different drugs all over the counter, were you trying to make medicine? He bobbed his head while speaking. The translator said, one thing save of my people. I think I understand, Callie said slowly. We don't have anything in here that's safe for your people, so you're trying to make your own. He bobbed his head vigorously. Callie lowered her head and blushed. I'm sorry I misjudged you. Please come with me, I'll bring you to the supply room. You can get whatever you need to properly treat your injury. Jake's posture relaxed. She led him down the hallway to where it branched toward the elevator to the right or continued forward to the mess hall. The former owner, who she'd inherited the ship from, was a doctor who made most of her money on salvage runs. The heavy, electronically sealed door to her left was where she'd stored all of her medical supplies. There are some expensive specialty supplies in here, Callie said sternly as she opened the door for him. Please, only take what you actually need. Yes, Jake's translator said. I've asked the helmsman to put in a request for a new translation module if you decide to stay with us after we reach Port Liberty. It would be helpful to have a doctor on staff. Let me know if you're willing to come along with us. Tyrell, Callie said, please give Jake clearance to the medical supplies room. Jake thanked her as he entered the supply room. Are you sure about that? Tyrell said over her personal communicator. He could be lying. I'm not some piddly little telepath. I'm a full-fledged psionicist, Callie scoffed. I'd know if he was being deceptive. Callie continued down the hallway to the break room, where the twins were waiting. She sighed deeply as she stood in front of the closed door. The twins were just adolescents and didn't fully understand the ramifications of playing with members of other species yet. Gal team were both agile and incredibly strong. If they kept trying to roughhouse with her, someone was going to get seriously hurt. As their training progressed, it became more and more likely that she'd be the one to get injured. She'd already had this talk with them before. Yet, there they were, lying in wait just on the other side of the door. Callie's combat empathy ability was screaming warnings from deep within her as she opened the door and stepped inside. What did I tell you about ambush games? She said angrily as she instinctively dodged their first two attacks. The twins were giggling. Snowballs? Callie said in surprise as they launched their next volley. Her furry brown tails attempted to swat the projectiles out of the air, but she still ended up covered in snow. Did I do good? Ziku said with a massive toothy grin. We hit her, Yari roared in triumph. Callie shook her head and laughed. That might be cheating. Each of those snowballs was about the size of my head. It's not my fault our hands are so big, Ziku objected. I teach you to manipulate the elements, Callie said with a smile, and you made snowballs? Ziku nodded his massive, black-scaled, reptilian head. As long as you don't do it around any of the equipment, Callie said with a shrug. Did you want something, Mama? Yari asked. Just because I agreed to adopt you two doesn't mean you have to call me that, Callie said emphatically. Do you not like it? Yari said as his feet shifted and his shoulders swayed. There was something deeply primal in the body language of the Gal team that was easy for Callie to interpret. Yari was both embarrassed and feeling a bit rejected. You can call me that if you want, Callie said with a warm smile. Just give me some time to get used to it. I never expected to adopt a pair of giant fuzzy reptiles. Strictly speaking, their species was classified as anti-hominids. They had taken quickly to her. Having mistaken her uterus for a venom sac, Callie would never be able to have children of her own. Ziku lowered his head slowly, rested his black-scaled hand against the thick white fur on his chest so his hooked claws were facing downward and his thumb pointing to the side. That goes for you too, Ziku, Callie smiled. I have an important question for the two of you. Mama, Ziku said happily. After we arrive at Hyrule, I have to go on another trip. I have a really nice house on the planet. I have friends down there that can look after you until I get back, or you can stay on the ship and come with me. It's safer on the planet. The brothers looked at each other and made subtle movements as they briefly discussed their options non-verbally. We stay with Mama, they both said in unison. Their voices had a deep rumble that was reminiscent of purring. I don't want any complaints about being bored, Callie said sternly. Callie wasn't entirely sure how firm their grasp on the trade language really was. She suspected they were using the word as a display of respect but wasn't sure how others would react to the honorific. Due to the frigid hostility of their homeworld, there just wasn't much information about Zog-Galteam culture available. She also wasn't sure how old they were in Terran terms. She knew they were adolescents, but that didn't narrow it down much. They weren't even close to the size of a mature Zog-Galteam. They were likely to grow another foot in height and at least that across the shoulders. To go check on Gowri, Callie said firmly. You boys stay out of trouble, okay? They nodded. She stepped back into the hallway, and mentally scanned the ship. Gowri was still in her quarters. Callie headed down the corridor to Gowri's quarters and knocked on the door. Who is it? The avian woman asked with a hint of excitement in her voice. It's just me, Callie said with a faint chuckle. The avian woman opened the door. What do you want? We'll be arriving at the planet Hyrule soon, Callie explained. I was wondering if you were planning on staying on with us, or heading your own way. I thought I agreed to go to war alongside you, she said irritably. Have you changed your mind? Her black feathers puffed up slightly as she spoke. Her hands were nearly identical to those of Terrans, but her feet were three-toed and bore sharp talons. Her left wing had been mangled, halfway down its length, during an acid storm following the attack on Najrok. I never got around to asking you what your people are called, Callie noted. Sirvani, the woman replied. Her beak clicked slightly as she spoke. Lady Darkseid to the bridge, Tyrell said over the ship intercoms. What now? Callie asked irritably as she excused herself and headed back toward the bridge. Try to convince Syntholo to come with us, Gowri called her. That's up to his government, Callie yelled back as she rounded the corner at the end of the hallway and rushed back to the elevator. She couldn't help but be amused by Gowri's strange preoccupation with Syntholo. Interspecies relationships are virtually unheard of, mostly due to physical and cultural incompatibilities. With Cyan and Talshi they'd managed the physical side of the equation, but the cultural side had been horrendous. Syntholo was a Laika, which meant he has a secondary form bearing the resemblance to some sort of animal. It could be avian, but be putting far too much stock in that hope. It could be nearly anything, but at the end of the day, none of that mattered. He was a member of the Kaylani Dominion, and his heart would always belong to Mistress Kaylani, first and foremost. For members of the Dominion, this is just the nature of things. Unlike Cyanide, Gowri didn't strike her as capable of sharing a partner's body or heart. The elevator opened as she approached, and closed behind her as she stepped onto it. You've been spoiling me with the level of control you have over the ship, Callie said. With a smile. If we do get a larger ship, will you still open doors for me? That all depends on the ship, Tyrell said over the elevator speakers. How so? As long as I don't have to fend off system attacks from other cyberpaths, I could manage a much larger ship. The systems just have to be linked correctly. There's a limit to how many simultaneous functions I can manage. I knew I should have hired someone like Cyberop Gregor, Callie teased. All those rumors about Gregor are a heaping pile of Flanix dung. There's no way one cyberpath could manage an entire fleet. Watch that, Callie grinned. Once you get that kinda dogma in your head it can limit possibilities, and prevent you from reaching your true potential. Who's spouting dogma now? Tyrell scoffed as the door opened. Callie stepped onto the bridge. Syntholo was sitting at one of the wall terminals typing furiously. I thought you were going to the shuttle to get some privacy, Callie commented. I couldn't establish a link to the closest relay satellite, Syntholo grumbled. I invited him up to use the ship's primary transmitter, Tyrell said. I didn't think you'd mind. He needed to get confirmation of his orders. You should have seen it. He completely lost his composure. I most certainly did not, Syntholo scoffed. I didn't even come close to showing my teeth. I don't know, Tyrell teased. You looked pretty angry to me. I don't like being this far from Dominion space, Syntholo said as he waited for a reply to his transmission. I was hoping to go home for a while. I serve the mistress, not some government liaison officer who has probably never even met Kaylani in person. I will not accept an order like this unless it's verified by Mistress Kaylani herself. You've actually met Kaylani? Tyrell asked with a note of surprise in his voice. We all work our hardest to earn her favor, Syntholo said with a grin and a blush. I'm not sure I was worthy, but she believed me to be. If you don't mind me asking, Callie's tails stirred restlessly as she spoke, what were your orders? I was asked to stay by your side, follow along wherever you go, and report your activities back to the Dominion. I'm a scout, trained in first contact protocols. I act with honor. I refuse to spy on people unaware. Callie smiled. You told me this so I'd be aware of it, in order to soothe your apprehension? I wasn't specifically instructed not to tell you, Syntholo said with a mischievous smile. The terminal beeped twice. Syntholo turned his attention back to the screen and read quietly. Why did you call me to the bridge? Callie asked. I've gotten some initial responses from your contacts, Tyrell said. Gao-Run regrets to inform you that Grax is out on assignment, so your transfer request can't be fulfilled at this time. Your new armor from Alliance Arms isn't ready yet, and Bruja would like to know what you'd like her to do with some object you have in cold storage. Ask Bruja to keep it in storage until I give her instructions to the contrary, Callie said. Send Gao-Run a salvage request. You'll find the ship's location in the flight logs. I hope you don't mind, Tyrell said with a faint blush. I noticed the entry in the logs when I first came on board. You managed to kill the crew without damaging the ship. It seemed a waste to just leave it there, so I put in a request to have it towed back. I was going to ask you how you managed to take out the crew, but I'm guessing the answer would just leave me with more questions. You're learning, Callie said with a smile. I hope you weren't planning on keeping the ship for yourself. You offered me my own ship as payment, Tyrell grinned. I do like having options. Is that all? She asked. Have you heard anything from Shinji? Tyrell scratched his head. You'll have to read that one for yourself. It's a bit. Callie grinned. That will teach you not to read my private mail. I just checked the messages to make sure they're not urgent, he objected. Was it urgent? He seemed to think so. He asked to come up with the first shuttle. Well, begged may be more accurate. He wants to come on board before we even start taking on supplies. There was a playful look in Tyrell's eyes. Let's just say I'm not convinced it was the ship he was wanting to board. Callie blushed. Oh. Another round with Shinji did sound nice, but if she had it her way he'd be boarding her while she was pulling into Cyan's port. Would you like to respond personally? Nah, make him wait. Callie giggled. Business before busyness. Well, I guess I know what room to stop monitoring, Tyrell said with mock disgust. I've gotten my clarification. I guess that settles that, Syntholo grumbled. The higher-ups seem to think we'll be passing through Dominion space and have told me to stay on board, monitor your actions, and guide you through our space once we get there. I just hope you're not planning on too many detours. We'll be heading straight to the Pilth Stargate once we're done restocking, Callie said. Actually, Tyrell said apologetically, I was sent a flight plan, Lady Darkseid. We've been directed to make a quick stop at a location hidden within the Dew Star Nebulae. The instructions are strangely specific. While his name isn't listed, I suspect Phantom Hound is involved. Who is it from? Callie asked. Cynthia Porter, he said with a shrug. Really, Callie said with surprise. Was it sent from Farpoint? It doesn't say, he said, and my attempts to trace it failed. It is a little strange, Callie said. I've only met her once. Well, once after I woke up, I suppose. Syntholo studied her as she spoke. I guess you left an impression, Tyrell shrugged. It's not every day you watch someone unload a pistol into their own body, Callie said and then reconsidered her words. Well, it wasn't technically my body. I guess you could say it was a copy. Farpoint never makes just one. Just one what? Syntholo asked in confusion. I was manufactured at Farpoint, Callie said with a smile. It wouldn't be accurate to call me a clone. There were multiple genetic donors, after all. I'd stop asking questions if I were you, Tyrell quipped. You'll be asking forever. I guess that would explain the tails, Syntholo remarked. Don't be silly, Callie said with a soft chuckle. The tails came later. Syntholo glanced at Tyrell, back at Callie and then looked back at Tyrell. See what I mean? Tyrell smirked. She's awfully quick to answer, Syntholo said with amusement. I think she just enjoys confusing us. I'm not telepathic, so I can't tell if she's being honest or not. It really doesn't make much difference to me as long as it keeps things interesting. You'd rather an interesting lie to a boring truth? Tyrell said as he cocked an eyebrow. Wouldn't you? Syntholo asked with a bright smile. I've been sent to investigate hundreds of planets. I've always enjoyed learning about local legends. Finding out the truth is almost always a disappointment. Almost always? Tyrell asked with sudden interest. So sometimes the reality is more interesting? I may have to ask you up to the bridge during our trip and ask you to tell me some of those stories. Syntholo looked like he was about to launch into a story. We'll be returning to normal space momentarily, Tyrell said over the ship's intercom. I guess that's our cue to get back to work, Callie sighed. In that case, Syntholo said as he turned back to the console, please allow me to add a few requests to your resupply list. I just got a few requests from Jake, Tyrell noted. It looks like he's planning on staying with us. Callie breathed a sigh of relief. Not having to find someone to staff the medical bay would save a lot of hassle. It hadn't been much of a consideration when she was going her own way, but now she was responsible for lives other than her own.